I've had this story kind of like in my head in some form or another for a long ass time. I just never actually thought I'd write it. And but like, okay, so what did you think? You've actually read the book. What did you think of the story, not the punctuation?
So what I thought of the story, first of all, it's very, I'm trying to think of how to put this because it is a political, almost satirical look at it at evolution of politics done all in the wrong way. And not that you did it all the wrong way, the people did it all the wrong way. The characters do it all the wrong way. They're following their instincts. So what I loved about it's a clever and very intricate and what the subtle nature of how things are explained, and it's almost like your brain is there before the story gets there because you're really good at leading people into the next thing and you're like, oh, they're gonna, oh, and they did. Not that you're ahead of the story, but you're just kind of getting into that mindset. So the story itself, first of all, I think is kind of, can be said it's a tragedy, and the characters are, some kind of go, God, they all go different ways. It's hard to put a pin in it. Um, because some actually rise above and become stronger. Some go into sacrifice. Some actually go darker. And so it's kind of showing all the different choices that people can make. It's a really interesting thought experiment. What I enjoyed about your main character, Eliza, is how her main thrust is to provide for her kid.
Yeah.
And she needs, so I'm not going to give spoilers away either, obviously, but that is her thing. And I love that you took the approach of a mother because that's very relatable. And even if you don't have kids, women generally and intrinsically have something they're doing something for, whether it's their husband, their my dogs. I mean, like you have a thing that you're thinking of, this thing that's motivating you to do better. And that's, I think, her main motivation as she goes through the story. It's just so smartly done. The vocabulary is beautiful. I absolutely love and I think I said this, I don't know if you understood what I meant, maybe you did, but I think I call it variation of sentence origin. And what that means is you're not starting the sentences over and over with the same thing. They did this, they did that, he did this, he did that. You have a beautiful touch with how to start sentences in an interesting way. So the read overall was so fluid and enjoyable, and interesting. And I never got caught up in any kind of repetition other than, things that had already been noted that sounds like you've changed. But I loved I could really tell it came from a place in your heart connecting to your mind, trying to bring the emotional journey into the cranial thing. Yeah. With they're going through this really bad monarchy and then they choose something that sounds good. It's good on paper. And then when they put it into practice, what happens? And I love use stratification so frequently in certain points that now it's ingrained in my brain. But it's such a perfect word, the stratification of how they create these layers in society that are so subtle at first. And then they just keep very slowly boiling the frog until it's so oppressive and they're back to where they are. And I just found that it was, I don't know. I really loved the journey of it. It really is a thought experiment, and I recommend it. So
I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you guys taking a look at it. And, there are a couple of things that were really important to me. Like having the emotional journey of it leading the story was kind of really important to me because that's just how human beings are. And I think that that's why a lot of people get caught up in these far left movements. And, I wanted to humanize that because, it really does frustrate me. Like, I know we watch socialism all the time on the channel, but like, it really does frustrate me that the right and conservatives so dehumanize the left in how they speak about him. Now, the left does that to the right too. And I'm not making an excuse. I'm not forgiving them, but like, there are reasons that people are leftists, and it's not that they're dumb, and it's not that they're mentally ill, and it's not that they're any of these things. There are actually practical reasons why this happens. And if people don't acknowledge that there are realities in the world that might push someone into this type of position, then that problem is never actually going to be solved, and the cycle is just going to repeat like over and over and over. And that's not to say, and I explicitly said this, I think, well, maybe I didn't say it in the book. I said it somewhere when I was writing about the book. I'm not trying to make excuses I'm not trying to be an apologist for capitalism. I don't think capitalism is like necessarily the world's perfect system either. But like, I think it's better than communism, obviously, for
Yeah.
many, many reasons. But
Flawed. Everything is flawed.
yeah.
You know.
And that's honestly one of the big lessons of the book is that
Yeah.
human beings are imperfect. You cannot try to force human beings into a reality in which they are forced to be perfect at all times because they are fundamentally flawed and that is just the way it goes. And if you don't plan that into the way you're living together, you are kind of doomed to failure.
Well, and also it's an interesting mind hurdle in the devil you know versus the devil you don't. Do you take the chance? It's bad, but I know this bad. I don't know what that would be. If that looks better, but I understand this bad. So it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And a lot of people in your story, they take the chance because they finally get caught up enough where they finally get that push, that last straw. And they're like, all right, we're going. And the rebellion is real. And then when it goes into practice, again, it's all roses and, lemonade until all they realize how far they've been boiled. And
Yeah.
I got the emotional content of it and I agree completely, but I also love that you didn't just present a like solution. You're really, here's the answer. La, angels singing. You're like, we're trying another system. And I loved that, they're admitting this is also flawed. We're trying to do something different. And it's also flawed. And I enjoyed that as well because you didn't come off like, this sucks, here's your answer. And I really love that you let us, especially by the end of it, really think about, well, what would I do? What do I think the solutions are? You really got me thinking about what I think, not like the perfect society, but it's like, what if I was in charge, if I was king of the forest, what would I do? And I thought that was a really cool way to leave it. I felt very satisfied at the end of it. And I also agreed, and I'm not going to say anything, but you had put in your acknowledgments that you had a different outcome for Eliza's daughter. And I really love the choice that you made. As tragic as that was, I feel like that drove the frickin' point home because it does show when someone voluntarily gives themselves over, it can really mean, like, to me, that was like the moment of singularity where brain meets automaton and there's just nothing left of the human.
Yeah. And it was the only choice that could be made at the end of the day. And I started with a different choice because I've never written fiction before. I don't know how to do this, but it became very clear to me after kind of like I was like, no, this is the only way to go. But, I didn't want to make a commentary too much in the story on like, here's what we should do because I don't know, Jennifer, I'm kind of in a place in my life where I know what I don't want. I know what I think is a bad idea. I just don't actually really care about forcing people into any sort of thing right now. I'm kind of like, people should look at what's going on and make up their own minds, and I will be a source of information and ideas for people. But, I don't view it as my job to convince people of anything. I'm just, putting my point of view out there. And so, but I did get my kind of, licks in, and there is, an afterword to the story in which I was like, here are all the ways in which communism is bad and wrong and fails every single time. And you guys are going to say that I'm exaggerating in this book, but I'm not exaggerating in this book because this is what always happens every single time.
There's historical record of everything you put in that book. Yeah. None. I mean, it's fiction, but it's not. It's based in reality. It's grounded in reality. And I think what came to mind so much during the story the most was probably Animal Farm. Because have you read Animal Farm?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a quick read. If anybody hasn't read it, take an afternoon. It's a novella. It's very short. And it's so good because they're all the animals. What was interesting, what I think it was George Orwell who wrote that, the animals have different memory spans. And what's interesting about that is that's kind of true to people because it depends on it. To me, it was an allegory for people who are older, who have been through a lot more life, people who remember longer, people who are like, say, all of our generations. You've got your silent generation that's dying out, the boomers who are aging out. Then you've got, the X gen, millennial, Zeds. Now we've got Alpha. Did I miss anybody? So and everybody has a different perspective because they have different memory spans. And that's kind of how Animal Farm is set up. Everybody has the horses remember the longest, so they remember the sages. And they had this chalkboard where they had once they kicked the farmers out, because the farmers were the tyrants, they were the kings. So they kicked the farmer out and the animals took over the farm, and they had a thing on the side of the barn where they wrote their rules. And the horse had the longest memory, so he remembered the rules. And as the pigs began to take over,
They started changing the
Rules began to change, and the animals with the shortest memory didn't know that the rules were ever different because they couldn't remember that. So only the horse would sit there and go, now, well, this used to say da 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 da, and the rest of the sorry, what? John just sent me a message. I'm going to ignore that for a second. So the horse is the one that was sitting there going, no, but this used to say this. This has changed, and the ones with the shorter memories are like, no, it's always been this way. This is how it's always been. This has just said this, and it kept changing and changing and changing until the pigs became standing upright and wearing clothes, and then it was like all animal. Then the only rule was all animals are created equal. Some are more equal than others, and that was the last rule. And then the horse died, and nobody remembered what the rules ever were.
And memory was a very important part of that book. And like our ability to remember, our ability to even just like talk about accurate history or like, you know, document accurate history or refer back to it. And actually there is a character, and I don't actually know if this was in the version I sent you or if I wrote this after. I don't remember. It all kind of jumbles together. But there is a character that does end up going to re-education camp for trying to come in and say, that's not what happened. This is what happened.
Yes, I think, wasn't that one of the Marcuses?
It's not anymore.